subscribers. Does it notify your subscribers as well? Did that pop up?
I don't know. I hope so.
I don't know. I hope so. I sent out an email to anyone who like to all, everyone on my list, and I think
Yeah.
Luma sends out something as well. I believe so. Connecting, and we're live. Welcome to Office Hours, the first Substack Live I've ever done. I'm Allie Iseman of Passport to Pleasure. Today I'm joined by my wonderful friend, Dr. Amber Hull, and we're going to dive into talking about the film that's got everyone talking, Baby Girl. Office Hours is going to become a monthly live that I'll be doing for my subscribers. This one is for everyone. Moving forward, it's actually going to be for my paid subscribers. So either way, whether you're subscribed, paid subscriber, I love that you're here. I'm delighted. We're here to answer your questions about love, sex, and all modern relationships. Today, like I said, we are going to talk about Baby Girl specifically, but don't let that stop you from dropping in any questions you have, whether it's about the film or about anything related to consensual non-monogamy or anything like that. And I'll let Dr. Amber introduce herself as well, a little bit more in depth.
Yeah. Hey, everyone. I'm Dr. Amber Hall. My Substack is called Under the White Coat. I write about human sexuality. I write about just life and medicine. I write about non monogamy. I write about kink. I write about consent. So I am very much in the same wheelhouse as what Ali is up to. And we went and saw this movie together a couple of weeks ago as a break from like the fires in
Yeah.
LA. And so I personally think it's important to kind of take a break in the midst of sort of all the chaos in the world to, enjoy something entertaining and especially something as thought provoking as this movie and as conversation starting as this movie. So I'm excited to be here and to talk about this and to field some questions.
Yeah, and I think that ties in great to actually how we initially met and why I was like, I want you in my life. Like you're going to be a friend. Just that really passion for understanding pleasure as a part of healing and as a part of a well-lived life, not a privilege, but a necessity for health. And you actually have helped me with that too, because for those of you that have been following along, I am normally based in Los Angeles. I am currently en route to start a new chapter in London. I cannot stay, unfortunately, in LA until the air is no longer toxic because I have a lot of respiratory issues from long COVID. But that is another story we'll talk about. But having those moments of pleasure is so important. So let's dive into this film and the good, the bad, the juicy. I personally loved it a lot more than I actually thought I was going to. So that was a really nice surprise. For me, that sort of like hesitation came from just there's been so many just shit examples of kink and alternative relationships and like all that stuff in the media to date. And what to me was different is there's been no sort of responsibility around that till now, and I feel like this film did a really great job of like, no, they weren't perfect. This is not a 101 film on like how to do kink BDSM, but there was a responsibility for the learning that I felt at least that the characters were going through, and I felt that it held that differently than other films I've seen before. And we are going to talk spoilers, so if you haven't seen the film, just know that's coming.
Yeah, absolutely. I wasn't expecting to like it either because it seems like so much of what Hollywood likes to do is this trope that
Yeah,
really plays into like the male gaze and what you know like this sort of like preconceived notion of what female sexuality is supposed to look like and this
yeah,
whole like daddy dom concept. And that said, I'm a big fan of A24 and I loved Tangerine and I loved the Florida
hmm
Project and like these sort of like artsy films that look at these really human concepts in a very sort of like softening way. And
yeah,
so I went into it thinking like this is just going to be another movie with like a trope about kink. And I thought that the filmmakers, like you said, did a really good job of sort of getting across the vulnerability. And the one of the questions that really struck me is like just be honest. Like what do you want?
yeah,
Like just be honest. And there are so many relationships, I feel like, whether the relationships just starting out or like relationships that have been intact for a while, where people are sort of like looking at maybe like what can we do to spice things up or what can we do to make things new. And it all boils down to a question of honesty and like
Mhm.
being honest with oneself and feeling safe to be vulnerable and honest with a partner. And so those were the things that really struck me this that I wasn't expecting to either see and that made me like the movie more than I thought it would.
100%. And I love that you mentioned that too, because that's actually something as a open relationship coach that I work on a lot with couples that come to me. It's that whether they're looking to open up their relationship to like explore consensual non-monogamy or not, they're always looking to open up. And that means to each other as well, and to be have their relationship be that safe space to get curious, to explore new things, because it's really scary when you
Mhm.
discover something new about yourself if you haven't cultivated that foundation to be able to talk to your partner. You don't know how they're going to react. Like, is this a safe space? That is so much the work of relationship. And so I couldn't agree with you more. That concept of like, just be honest. And you know what? Honest can be, I don't know. That's
Mhm.
okay. To be like, you
Yeah.
know what? I'm uncomfortable and I'm not sure. Do you want to like try some stuff together and see? And let's create some really clear boundaries and kind of touch a couple new things. And yeah, I loved so much. And like one of my favorite moments, I know I already like talked to you about this, but something I saw represented in this film that I have literally never seen, and my background is entertainment. I have watched a lot of movies and a lot of television. I have never seen dom aftercare represented
Yeah.
ever
Yeah.
before. That
Mhm.
struck me. Like it was I wept. Like it
Yeah.
was so beautiful to see. And do you want to talk a little bit about specifically like what that is and kind of your experience with it? Because I know we sit on slightly different sides of that energy dynamic.
Yeah, absolutely. And kind of circling back to what you said before, in that our sexual health is a really important part of our overall physical health, right? And I write a lot about this. It's like, I talk about not drinking and, getting adequate sleep and making sure that we have a good diet and, taking time to meditate if that's sort of like within your practice. And so I look at this as an overall, like, integrative and holistic part of our experience as human beings. And
Yes.
that's not to say like some people are asexual, and I'm not like trying to erasure on that. But, you know, the psychology of this movie is very much a part of our overall health. And when you're talking about a kink interaction, whether it's two people or more than two people involved, everyone is bringing something to the table in terms of desire, in terms of ability, in terms of what their body can do. And, I think there's this misconception, partially fueled by, the Hollywood portrayal of what kink like should be or what it's supposed to look like, or this whole
Yeah.
like one true way thing within the kink community. That the reality of it is that excuse me, especially as people are growing older and you're dealing with things like, vaginal dryness or atrophy or injury or erectile dysfunction, premature ejaculation, like all of these very like natural processes that the body goes through, whatever level of disability, like there are ways to find pleasure
Mm,
that if one thinks outside the box of like PIV, penis and vagina, with the, goal of orgasm is being like the one and only definition of sex, like once you get outside of that, there's so much connective power between, just things as simple as like eye gazing or like,
mm,
rubbing a rose or like a feather over your partner's face or, their clavicles or their arms or, like there's
mhm.
so much in that exchange. And, the other thing that I thought in terms of the trope, right, that I wouldn't like about this movie is, trying to box in feminine sexuality.
Mhm.
And, you know, the power play can be super hot, even in the absence of like whips and chains and, tying people up and, any sort
Oh,
of
yeah, those are
genital
just accessories.
contact at
Yeah,
all, right?
yeah.
Like it's that psychological connection that can make these experiences so powerful. And whether an individual is in the position of dominance or in the position of submission, there is this surrender to the experience,
Yeah.
right? And just getting lost in your partner, which again I think is so important, especially now, is like there's a lot of just turmoil and like geopolitics and environmental situations and fires and all this stuff, it's like when you can just tune out the outside world and tune in to the person and the experience in front of you, it almost is like this flow state,
Yeah.
right?
Mhm.
But when you come down from that, regardless of the side of the power dynamic that you're on, I think it's important to check in and like, are you doing okay? Do you need to be held? Are there, do you need to cry? Do you need to scream? Do you need a snack? Do you need to be left alone for a while? And really
Mhm.
checking in with the other partner. And I thought that in this movie, that scene where he's like, well, the dominant character was like, will you hold me? I was like, "Oh, thank you."
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Because sometimes we just
Aftercare
need to
is
be
for
held.
everyone.
Exactly.
Yeah. No, I think, that's a great identification too, because I think there was one component to me specifically that felt a little tropey, but they didn't kind of hit it over the head too much, and they made up for it with so many other areas just like this one that I was like, "You know what? That's a pass." And for me, that was sort of the trying to tie in a, history of early childhood trauma for her
Mhm.
and, like, connecting it to, "Oh, this is why she's into that," which is, like, totally fine. I am someone who will, extol the virtues of BDSM and power play for its potential to help heal, but it's not required. It's not like you're only into kink because something happened.
Mhm.
It is something that you can be interested in for myriad reasons. So I did, I was a little eye rolly about like, oh, okay, yeah, she had this stuff go on and that's why, but they didn't harp on it. And there were so many other elements that I thought they tied in so beautifully and how they were both really learning to do this. And I thought it was so beautiful too, the way he was like this is also new for me. Like they were
Mhm.
figuring it out together and they didn't do it perfectly. And mistakes were made and they learn from them instead of letting it like blow everything up and I just thought that was handled so 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 well and they touched a little bit on his seemingly open relationship with his other
Mhm.
partner as well, which I enjoyed as well, but again wasn't like harped on. It was just like, oh yeah, and that's the dynamic we have, and I was like, oh, it's just normalized. Oh, like
Yeah.
it was just great. It's like, oh yeah, we've talked about it, it's clear.
Yeah.
That's it,
So
great.
yeah, I want to ask you this question because you're more of the like relationship expert obviously than I am, but there was an element of infidelity, right?
Mhm,
Like the
mhm,
main character was going behind the back of her primary partner in order to have this experience with her kink
mhm,
partner. And there was that scene that you're referring to in the movie where he's like, well, yeah, I'm seeing this other character, like we see one another, but like what you and I have is in play space. And
mhm,
he sort of alluded to the okayness of that
mhm, mhm,
versus infidelity.
mhm.
So what's your take, like if someone were to come to you after an experience of infidelity, whether they're single or divorced, if they have that in their history, like how what's your take on non-monogamy versus infidelity, or like if someone is like, we want to salvage this relationship, but we don't even know how to talk to one another about opening up.
Mhm, mhm.
How's your
So
approach to that?
so you're saying the person who is, coming to me has a history of, being cheated on, for example, or being the
Right.
person who has cheated? Really,
Either
honestly,
way.
it doesn't actually matter. It's that
Yeah, either
history
way.
of relying on, lies and deceit
Hmm.
and not being able to having a practice of not being able to be authentic with those that you consider your intimate partners. And it's a
Right.
lot of personal work and it may require looking at, depending if they're partnered and wanting to, salvage and move forward in this partnership or are they not and they want to learn how to build relationships in a new way moving forward. But it's really about learning to accept and celebrate yourself authentically and make sure that you are building relationships with people that are safe containers to be like, I don't know, or I fucked up. Can we talk about it? The relationship that has the highest probability of longevity is one that you can fuck up in. And there's a difference between, a moment of infidelity, having an experience with somebody else that wasn't agreed upon beforehand and a ongoing, affair that isn't talked about. Those are two different dynamics. Mistakes happen. ongoing repeated things are a behavioral pattern, so they need to be addressed a little differently. Both of them do have the commonality in that it requires everyone involved to take a leap and be uncomfortable. The only way to trust someone, whether you are rebuilding trust or building trust for the first time, is to give them the power to hurt you and let them prove that they won't over and over again. It's the only way. So it's uncomfortable. And that doesn't mean, willy-nilly if somebody is constantly, hurting you and not taking any responsibility and there's no accountability and like, no, absolutely not. That's a major behavioral problem. But if there are, if this is a partnership between two people, if this is a duo or a couple or whatever terminology you want, a dyad, if both people are invested in finding a way forward, that's great. But there has to be accountability. There has to be a willingness um, to potentially get uncomfortable and be hurt again and turn that into an opportunity for learning and a bid for connection and intimacy.
Yeah. So I kind of want to take it back to the movie again too,
Yeah.
because the primary, like, I guess, primary couple in the relationship, Jacob and Romy, at the end
Hmm.
end up, like, the relationship remains intact. Like, there's
Yeah.
definitely this, sort of explosive thing that happens in their relationship, but in the end they carry forward. And part of the reason that she, ended up going behind his back about this whole thing is that when she would express her desires to him, he would shut her down and
Yeah.
like shame her and make her feel as though, and there's a scene in the movie where she's just like, I just want to be normal, like
Hmm.
some of us, like, weren't born like vanilla, like it's just,
Hmm.
and having the courage to come to a partner and be like, this is what I'm interested in. This is what gets me off. This is, I want to try this together in an effort to bring the two of you closer to one another. If that person pushes you away,
Yeah.
it, it makes you feel unseen.
Very.
Right. And so much like the milk scene in this movie where he like sends a glass of milk across the bar to her. And, it was just like his way of saying, I see you.
Hmm.
And that to me was, you know, like captured so much of what kink is about,
Yeah.
right?
It's radical acceptance and
Yeah.
celebration. I mean, I definitely bump against the term normal. I understand why it was used in that way in this film.
Mhm,
Let's talk about briefly, like, what is kinky, right? Like,
mhm.
how is kinky even defined? My favorite definition of kinky that I've heard is anything outside of missionary sex in bed. So guess what, everyone? You're probably some shade of kinky, and that's okay. And if we're going to use the word normal, which just means, average, common, whatever, kinky interest in BDSM, power dynamics, it's not as uncommon as you'd think. And
Yeah.
so that's why I said, like, part of the work I do with couples early on is, are you a safe space for your partner to come to with this honesty? If you want to be seen, if you want a trusting relationship that's growth oriented, that has, the potential for longevity, are you a safe space for your partner or your partners to come to you with stuff that you don't like?
Mhm.
Because if you're not, if you're just going to shut them down, then there's no ability to have an honest relationship. It's okay if you guys aren't on the same page about everything, if you're not interested in the same things. And maybe we'll go into this a little bit too. Kind of that's what I loved about them touching on, like, his open dynamic and her, infidelity kind of juxtaposed against each other, is like, why we have this idea that like one person is going to give us the financial, emotional, sexual, all the things. It's so much, and that you're also going to be able to give that to them. It's so much pressure, and it's so just point blank unrealistic and unhealthy, to have that assumption. You have friends who you do different things with. You don't go. I'm just going to pull things out of the air. Your golfing friends, I guess, don't necessarily go see the indie films with you at the local. Like, we have different interests, and that's okay. So if your partner is able to come to you with, hey, I have these interests, I'm interested in bondage or humiliation or whatever, and you're not, that's okay, as long as you are able to create an agreement together where they're able to explore that if they want to, in a way that, you're both feeling safe. You don't have to do things that you're not interested in. If you're not sure and you're curious and you're like, yeah, let's explore that together. I don't know. That's great too. But at least be a space where they can come forward and talk about that with you without feeling shut down, judged, diminished in any way.
So
Get uncomfortable together.
yeah, I want to also point out, because our audience is not all non-monogamous people, right?
Mhm.
Like there are plenty of people in who, if you want monogamy, say that,
Yeah.
and be honest about that. And there's nothing wrong with that. Like, I'm not a
No,
proponent of one
absolutely not.
relationship structure or over another. What I think that some of this boils down to is the whole idea that we've been culturally sold, at least in the United States, that there's this one type of relationship that's considered a successful relationship. And if,
Yeah.
like, the marriage and the kids and the white picket fence and the successful careers and the soft focused, Instagram filtered version of people's reality. And then when they try to hold themselves up to this like curated ideal, they end up being disappointed,
Mhm.
right? And so I think that the whole concept of shame or not living up to an ideal is so deeply ingrained, especially for
Yeah.
women.
Yeah.
And I don't have the experience of men. And I think that, it is like, I am a feminist who is not a misandrist, right? And I think that these are important conversations to have because it touches on women's sexual autonomy and bodily agency and ability to make decisions for themselves and to customize relationships that meet their needs emotionally and intellectually and sexually, right?
Mhm.
Like, it's
Mhm.
not, and it's okay to, like, if you want to have a kind of like a free for all and, whatever, but for getting back to kind of the concept of shame and acceptance and being seen, like, what do you think are some of the social and cultural factors that lead women to maybe not ask for what they want until maybe later in life, or
Mhm.
not ask for what they want at all because they're afraid
Mhm.
of being shut down or shamed?
Yeah. I think there's a number of factors. A lot of them are very cultural, social. I mean, we're conditioned. I'll say I identify she, her, and it's a Western, lens that I'm using here. But this shows up in a lot of areas in the world. But we're conditioned from birth to be in a sense of service. Put our needs aside
Mhm.
for the ability to make sure everyone else's needs are met. Ours are secondary. It's a very either or individualist viewpoint rather than a communal society viewpoint of like everyone's needs are interrelated. If I'm robust and fulfilled, I'm able to support you more fully. It's a very, very, what's the word I'm looking for? It's a very insidious messaging that we get from immediately like entering the space. And it's subtle and it's also very overt, more so now than it's been in a long time. And it's supported in just so many ways. I mean, we didn't even map the clitoris until 2023, correct?
2023. Yep.
2023.
Mhm.
That is our major sex organ. And pleasure is a huge part of health as we're talking about here. But like, even if you consider that pleasure aside, it is an organ in our body that was
Mhm.
just like a mystery. Okay, like I want to for our penis owners, imagine not knowing anything about how your dick and balls work, just none, because it's just like it's just there, it's fine. Imagine up until a year ago, basically, not knowing anything about how that whole contraption works. That is the reality of people who possess vulvas. So there is, a lot of systemic change that is taking place and needs to continue taking place. And I am hopeful there's enough people committed to that through the tumultuous moment in history that we're in right now, that will continue to move forward. Because pleasure and understanding yourself without shame and being able to claim your needs enables you to be a safer, more sustainable space for other people to be that with you.
Yeah. And this is why I write so much about like women's health specifically. I write about hormones, I write about menopause, like
Mhm.
the the main like obstetrics and gynecology surgical textbook didn't have clitoral anatomy in the textbook until like 2019, right?
Yeah,
Like, many
didn't even
women
exist.
don't, yeah, don't know what their vulva looks like. And like, I don't know if you've seen these videos of like people going out onto the streets and asking men to like identify parts of
Yeah,
female anatomy. It's like
yeah,
nobody knows because we don't get taught this stuff
well, yeah,
in
Yeah.
school. People aren't talking about it in doctors' offices. There have been, the
Yeah.
women's health initiatives set menopause health and hormone therapy back decades. Like there was an
Yeah.
entire generation and a half of women who have been deprived, right, of this
Yeah.
treatment that a lot of women really benefit from, not just in terms of their sexual health, but in terms of their bone health, in terms of
Mhm.
cognition, in terms of, quality of life and cardiovascular health. And, so again, this is where what I talk about in terms of the medical side of things, there's the intersection with relationships and, you know, h- uh, how we relate to our own bodies and, self discovery through toys or like having a partner explore your body with toys and pointing out like what works and what doesn't. It,
Yeah.
it comes back to all of this like concept of shame, which I think comes a lot from the culture and from religion and from the just the fact that we don't educate about this
Yeah.
stuff, right?
Oh,
And
yeah,
so
that is just sort of, like, over there.
yeah, especially now as you know the access to medically accurate sexual health information is collapsing, to
Yeah.
be honest.
Well, and
That
it's very similar. Oh, sorry.
it's really important to have reliable resources for these things. And this is why we're having this conversation, right? Like,
Exactly.
yes, it's about the movie, but it's also about, important conversations about our physical
Yeah.
health.
Life represents art, represents life, represents art. Like, this is the power of art, whether it's film or writing or anything. It enables conversations and it ideally enables self-reflection. Like, just to go back to your point too of the gaping hole of, comprehensive, medical sexual education for women. I mean, my heart goes out to men too, and I'm speaking from a heteronormative lens here, but, like, I the men in my life wanna please their partners. They wanna know, and I don't just mean sexually, but also sexually. And so without the tools, they don't, like you were talking about out on the street, where is the clit? Where's what are these labias? Like, what they don't even know. That
Where does the pee
impacts
come
them as
from?
well. Exactly. If we don't know how the equipment works, they don't know how the equipment works, and we can't guide them because we have nothing. So it's like everyone loses in that framework to me. And then um that also builds on their shame of, oh, am I an inadequate lover, an inadequate partner because I can't bring, well, then I'm just going to shut down, like, women's pleasure doesn't matter and it's not real. And if we just open that up, it's a skill set. That's it. It's a knowledge base and a skill set. Just to your point about, sex education, relationship education is non-existent. It's just sort of this thing of like, oh, well, like, you had parents. And so, they probably did a great job. They probably had great communication and instilled in you a great example of how to relate and build relationships yourself. So, like, you're fine. Not true for most people. So these are
Right.
just skill sets. These are knowledge bases and skill sets to develop. And if we can move away from this like shame idea of like, oh, if you want anything outside of this very narrow, ill-informed definition of these things, there's something wrong with you. It's just inaccurate at such a scale. It strikes me dumb sometimes.
Yeah. Well, and I like the point that you brought up about parenting too, because
Mm,
I'm a pediatrician in my like that's my day job. And so I talk to a lot of women both during pregnancy and postpartum. And, we talk about pelvic floor health. And, I have kids, the average age of exposure to digital pornography is 12. Right. And
mhm,
so many parents are uncomfortable addressing issues related to puberty,
mhm,
like masturbation, privacy, bodily autonomy. I start talking to kids, by kindergarten at the latest of like, your body belongs to you. Keep your body safe. If
mhm,
anybody's, looking at you weird or making you feel uncomfortable or says something to you, it's okay for you to say you're making me uncomfortable. And then you go and
mhm,
tell your parents or a doctor, like all of this stuff about parenting ties into what we're talking about, right? Like
mhm.
these two things aren't such a huge dichotomy. And I've had people ask me in the past, like, you're a pediatrician, why are you talking about sexual health? I'm like, you know where babies come from, right? Like,
Right?
do you know where babies come from? Because I can explain that. But I thought also, tying it back into the movie, there's this scene at the beginning where, the main character is like wearing her little apron with her initials on it, and she's like
Mhm.
packing lunches for the kids, and her kids are giving her like an incredibly hard time because she's got teenagers, and they're like eye rolling and saying really kind of like
Really mean
mean
things.
things to her.
Yeah.
And so I also see this main character as like embodying this dichotomy between like being a mother and being a lover,
Mhm.
and like the different roles that we play in the different parts of our lives, whether it's at work as a CEO or at home in this loving relationship, or as a parent who's, your kids are giving you a hard time, or, in fantasy land where like everything else just goes away and you're completely like immersed in the experience of your
Yeah.
lover,
Yeah.
right? And so, do you have any thoughts on that sort of like self-imposed, I guess, siloing of parts of ourselves, as women?
Yeah. Well, I think as anyone, the treating any, of the many roles that we each have in our lives as somehow, separate and unrelated. Like the work I do is about relating. How you relate is how you relate. So if you're building relationship skills and communication skills in your primary partnership, that translates from the bedroom to the boardroom. Like these are all interrelated and they're not mutually exclusive. We are multifaceted human beings. It's so fun to play with those edges consensually, in safe environments. But, that's why I love power dynamics as well, is like, we have this high powered, incredibly effective CEO who needs and craves the balance of somebody, directing her in the bedroom. And she's able to find that, release. I'm somebody who also has that same dichotomy within myself. And I don't think those are in conflict. They are deeply related. And I value both of them. I am a better leader. I am a better business owner. I am a better friend, a better daughter, a better all of that when I am my best lover. It's all related.
Yeah. So someone in the chat asked what
Oh, yeah.
movie we're
What
talking
movie?
about. Yep,
Yeah.
we're talking about Baby Girl with
Baby
Nicole
girl.
Kidman. Yeah,
Yeah.
it came out on Christmas. I was actually gonna go rewatch it again before this conversation, but all of the show times were like at 10 o'clock at night. I was like, I'm an early bird. Do that
Yeah,
again, but
and we
er,
encourage if you haven't seen the film, go see it with a curious mind. Just,
yeah,
and we'd love to hear from you if you're watching the recording of this later. We'd love to hear from you, what you thought. You don't have to like it like we did. Neither of us thought we were gonna like it. Go in with a curious and open mind and, just see what's there for you. And again, like, please, thank you for, chiming in the chat. If you have any questions, whether it's related to Baby Girl or the work either one of us do, please don't hesitate. Drop that in the chat. We're here to answer your questions. This is going to be a monthly Substack live that I'll be doing called Office Hours. Sometimes I'll have amazing guests like Dr. Amber. Sometimes it'll just be me here to answer your questions about love, sex, and modern relationships. But it is still very much that. So feel encouraged to be a part of the conversation.
yeah. I wanted to touch on something that you just mentioned, which is the confidence of your experience in the bedroom sort of like radiates out into the rest of your life. And I think that that's very much true. And I've talked and like touched a little bit on dead bedrooms, and again like sort of long-term sexually exclusive monogamous relationships that at one
Mhm,
point or another become stagnant or stale or sort of predictable in ways that
mhm.
people will begin to reach out. I think more so to people like you, because as a doctor, people just assume that I'm not willing to have those conversations.
Yeah, which is
uh,
a shame. Yeah.
yeah, but um, tying it back into sexual and physical and mental health, like I think again, like exercise and avoidance of alcohol, and all of these things related to our medical, like physical body, like once you feel strong and confident in terms of your like physical self, that a lot of people that I've talked to are like, I feel more confident either approaching others or being more robust in my sexual encounters when I feel good in my own body, right?
Yes. Yes.
When I'm healthy between my ears, when I'm not anxious, when I'm not depressed, when I'm not, like diluting my faculties with alcohol or substances or all these kinds of things, like feeling more confident in one's own body makes one more confident in sexual
Mhm.
encounters or just in the dating world sort of writ large.
Mhm.
And also feeling more confident in sexual encounters makes one move through the world with a level of confidence that reflects in like professional success.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, I'm gonna touch on that. I just wanna share this wonderful
Yeah.
thank you so much. We have a comment. "It's a real pleasure to experience both of you having such a great open conversation about things that I grew up never having conversations about any of the physical or emotional realities of being human and interacting with a partner. Y Thank you for being here. Thank you for investing in your, human experience and your relationships by taking the time to be a part. You're very much a part of this conversation with us, and yeah, that's why we're doing this. We have to be talking about it. This is not only a part of life, is a fundamental part of life. It is how most of us are here. So it is integral uh, to understand this part of ourselves, and how we relate with each other, because we're a social species. We're always relating, always. So understanding all these components, and just to your point, Amber, that I call it sensual empowerment. And it does. It infiltrates everything when you have that confidence. Like for me, earlier, much earlier in my journey, I'm the first person in my family that got into, health and nutrition and fitness and stuff. And when I started strengthening my body and experiencing what that felt like, it's like, oh, I like feel different. I move differently in the world. I hold myself differently. And it's the same thing when I am feeling so authentic and fully expressed and met there, and not only accepted there, but celebrated there and encouraged there by partners in my case.
Mhm.
It just ripples out in every way. It's honestly like secret sauce superpower, like full on, like untouchable. Like, oh, you don't like me? Okay.
Yeah.
Like great. Next. It's
Yeah.
just things that used to phase me as, will always be a recovering people pleaser, just is nowhere near, the impact it used to have because of the enrichment of my relationships, and the authenticity of those connections.
Yeah. So, getting back to the comment, and thank you for saying that. And to be
Yeah.
fair, they didn't teach me any of this stuff in medical
Yeah.
school either. Like this
Yeah.
is all independent study, right?
Yep.
Like
Yep.
there is data to show that only 6.8% of OBGYN residents feel confident to treat women through menopause, right? Like,
Jesus.
and again,
And we're
the
over half of the population.
and
That's
like,
wild.
yeah, a million women hit menopause every year in the United States, and there are like 2,000 physicians that are menopause society certified to treat women. And I'm working on that certification this year, and I'm going to be writing about it throughout my journey because I think it's
Nice.
super important. And I'm listening right now to an audiobook called Estrogen Matters that was written by an oncologist who specializes in the treatment of breast cancer. And he's making the case for the use of hormone therapy
Oh,
in
wow.
cancer survivors because the data shows that it's actually safe. And
Wow.
so they made the point in the book that like it is totally fine, like one, and there are plenty of people in this world who later in life are like, I'm glad to not be interested in sex anymore. Like it frees up my schedule to invest in my friendships and
Mhm.
invest in my family and invest in my career or go play golf or whatever. Like you don't have to be sexually active in order to be a confident successful person moving through the world.
Yeah.
And there are plenty of people who just like are done with sex, and that's fine,
That's okay.
right? But you know, taking care of one's body, and like, and I really want to drive this point home, especially for women. It's like taking care of your vaginal health doesn't have to, it's not for somebody else, it's for you,
Yes.
right? Like
Yes.
vaginal estrogen like can help with the prevention of vaginal atrophy that causes pain and causes increased susceptibility for urinary tract infections and just like brain fog and all of these hot flushes and night sweats. Like there are all these
Mhm.
things about our physical health that will make you more successful in your professional career and just sort of like make you feel better regardless of whether somebody else is in the picture or not. And if you want to share your body with someone else, that's great. And
Mhm.
it has all these benefits that we're talking about, but you know what is considered sexual health has like rarely been taught even in the medical community. And like when I
Mhm.
brought up to my gynecologist at the time, who I've since replaced, about getting the HPV vaccine because I am a sexually active person and I don't want genital warts or cervical cancer. I was like, I want these vaccines and I'm not monogamous. And she like became visibly uncomfortable when I asked for this vaccine. And I was like, honey, like you look at vaginas all day long. Like,
Yeah.
why is my question
So
making
interesting.
you uncomfortable? And so, to be fair, like part of what I'm doing and writing on Substack is to educate the public, yes, but it's also, I really like that other doctors are paying attention to what I'm saying, because most of us didn't learn this stuff. And
Mhm.
some of my favorite people to talk to and to hear from are urologists, because
Mhm.
they've been dealing with men's sexual health. Like that's a primary part of their practice, right? Like they
Yeah.
talk about sex and dick jokes and all this stuff like all the live long day, and most of us don't. So a lot of family practice doctors and even OBGYNs don't know much about women's sexual health or hormone therapy or aging or any of this stuff, menopause,
Mhm.
because we weren't taught, because
Mhm.
women's sexual health isn't prioritized. And a lot of times our concerns and our questions are dismissed by the medical community. And I
Yep.
think that that's a real shame,
Well, I think it's
because it
related to
has an
what you
impact on relationships.
100%. Relationships are health all and relationships have an impact on our health as well. It's like the, shoot, I wish I could remember the study, that like the actual physiological impact of being in a, controlling or abusive or just unhealthy relationship is measurable.
Mhm.
So all of this is very much related to our health on, on every level. And I think what you just said too relates back to a point you brought up earlier of like, why are parents even so uncomfortable talking about these like basic life things with their kids? Is I think to me it's the same thing as when medical professionals, they're in a position of authority without the information. So there's a level of discomfort and unease, and therefore it's much easier. We have a whole culture built around being comfortable. It's much easier to just kind of push it away, shame it, make it invisible so you don't have to be uncomfortable. But when you do that, when you divert your discomfort, you're putting it on someone else, on your client, your patient, your child. It
Mhm.
doesn't go away. You're just putting it on someone else.
Yeah.
Um, we've got a question here too. Can you say some more about preventative measures when practicing non-monogamy?
Yeah.
Can you share what you mean by preventative measures? I'll say what I think you mean, but please feel free to drop in the chat too. Preventative, like how to open up without blowing up, which is something I say all the time. Ideally, how to protect the relationship from potential fracture. Um, Communication, practice having uncomfortable conversations, practice being just radically authentic with each other in your curiosities and your needs. Having conversations isn't the same thing as doing something. And that's actually something I want to talk about too in this chat, too, the difference between fantasy and desire. Um, Fantasy is something that turns you on when you think about it. And it can be anything. It is not beholden to societal norms, standards. It doesn't even need to be safe, just things in your mind that turn you on. A desire is something that you want to actually live out in your life. So fantasy is imagination, desire requires motivation. So you can fantasize about anything. There is nothing wrong with fantasizing about literally anything. When you want to take it into desire, when you want to practice it with your partner, whether it's consensual non monogamy or some version of kink or BDSM, that is when you need to outfit yourself with knowledge and information, and way before you take action on it, because if it's something new, it's this whole skill set that you need to develop. And relating is having a relationship is ideally a practice centered in growth. So growth requires being uncomfortable. If you're only interested in complacency and comfort and never really pushing outside of that, then pushing those boundaries might not be something that you're interested in. But if you're looking at consensual non-monogamy, look at why. What are you looking to get out of this? What is the desire for you here? What are you hoping that this experience or these experiences are going to add to your life and to your partnership? And if you are the one that's going to be bringing this up in your relationship, if you haven't talked about it with your partner before, the initial conversation isn't about trying to get something. The initial conversation is a temperature check. Hey, I heard about this thing, consensual non monogamy, ethical non monogamy. Have you heard this term? What have you heard about it? What are your thoughts on it? It's curiosity. You're trying to gauge where your partner is at with it. more than anything else. It's not about you, this initial conversation. And there's so much more I can say on this topic, which is why I write about it on Substack, why I create tons of content, why I'm available as a coach. I have resources, courses, etc. on my website as well. But there's a lot of I don't want to say like preventative or precautionary, like it's this like dangerous thing, but it's a practice. It's relationship practice. Whether you open up to include other people or not, it's understanding how your relationship is a practice for growth so that you're both able to be safely uncomfortable in those necessary conversations. Hopefully that answers your question. Um,
I'm going to
yeah.
take a crack at the medical side of
Yeah.
things.
Please.
So, yes, we all like going out into the world and playing with other people, but it's important to protect ourselves and the people that we're playing with, right? So, I actually did a whole talk on this. It's called Sex Ed Reboot. It's on my Substack Under the White Coat, and I go through all of the STIs and screening and treatment and prevention. So, kind of in a nutshell, pregnancy prevention. If you don't want to be a parent, pregnancy prevention is number one. So, if you're a guy and you don't want kids, either use a condom, get a vasectomy, or both, because vasectomies don't prevent against sexually transmitted infections. For women, there are a variety of different options for birth control, whether it's oral contraceptive pills or rings. The IUD is incredibly effective. That's what I recommend to my adolescent patients who like may eventually want to get pregnant but don't want pregnancy now. Um, Sexually transmitted infections, right? There's a whole bunch of them that I go through in the talk, but the thing that I remind people about is that you don't necessarily need to go into your family practice doctor's office and be like, "Can you order STI screening?" Which you should be able to do that. And if they're giving you a hard time or shaming you about it, then I would recommend finding a different doctor. There are commercially available like testing facilities online and in cities. Um, Talent testing is one
Mm-hmm.
here in Las Vegas because a lot of like the porn performers do filming here, and so they'll go and the STI screening for porn performers is like way above and beyond what most doctors order for just the general
Yeah.
population. And so talent testing cleared, Hello Wisp, Planned Parenthood. There are even like STI test screening kits that you can order and like have delivered to your house and send off.
Yeah.
But screening for things like HIV and gonorrhea, chlamydia, trichomonas. You can, fun fact, get gonorrhea, chlamydia in your throat. And I
Mm-hmm.
have actually gotten questions from other doctors who were like, my partner got a full STI screening and, we were both negative and now I've got, chlamydia in my vagina. And I'm like, did they screen your partner's throat? Because it is absolutely possible for your partner to like be harboring a little gonorrhea, chlamydia in their throat. Their doctor didn't bother to test their throat, and now you've got it in the genital region. So,
Mm-hmm.
throat swabs if you're having oral sex, rectal
Yeah.
swabs if you're being rectally penetrated. Um, Other preventative things, the HPV vaccine is something that I like went and got and paid out of pocket for
Me
myself
too. Mm-hmm.
because HPV can cause not only cervical cancer, it causes genital warts, it can cause like head and neck cancer in guys, and we do Papa Nicolau pap smears for women looking for HPV on the cervix and early signs of cervical cancer, but we don't screen for HPV in guys at all unless there is a
Yeah.
visible lesion, and in some cases, like they'll get cancer in their head, neck, or throat, tongue, because of HPV. So
Yeah.
HPV vaccination, I recommend for anybody who's sexually active, beginning in adolescence. Other things, PrEP is a medication that like patients can take it on a daily basis for the prevention of HIV transmission. There's also a way that you can take it around the time of a sexual encounter and anticipated sexual encounter to decrease the risk of HIV transmission. There's a way to take it so that you don't have to take it every day, but you kind of take
Mm.
it in the exposure window. DoxyPEP, there's been good data come out. There's still data lacking on cis women, but
Mm.
the data in men has shown it to be doxycycline is a very old antibiotic that has been shown in studies to decrease transmission of gonorrhea, chlamydia, and syphilis. like
Oh, cool. Didn't know
dramatically
that.
decrease the
Awesome.
transmission of gonorrhea, chlamydia, and syphilis around an unprotected sexual encounter. So, pregnancy prevention, STI screening on a regular basis, PrEP, doxypep, HPV vaccination, if those are things that you see yourself in need of.
Yeah. And just to contain this part of the conversation as well, these are all incredible tools and practices to minimize risk. But there is no such thing as safe sex. It is safer, right? So even when you open up your relationship, these are part of the risks you take as a sexually active adult in modern day, whether you have one or three partners or however many. So it's okay, include it in the conversation, remove the shame, and make it just a part of your sexual practice. This is a part of being a sexually active adult. And especially as you're opening up, there's conversation frameworks like RBDSM that include that as a part of the conversation. What is your sexual health currently? What is your sexual health status? What are your sexual health practices? Making sure that you are engaging with people who have sexual health practices that are in alignment with your own, but also, not but, and also knowing that risk is an inherent part of it. So, are you capable of taking that on? To me, I like to utilize sort of a metaphor horror. I love looking at look at athletes. Can you imagine if an athlete went in to their sports doctor and that doctor shamed them for having an injury?
Mm.
It's a part of it. That happens. So going into your doctor and experiencing, like, Dr. Amber's point, if your doctor is shaming you because you're actively trying to take preventative measures or you are having symptoms, get a new doctor. Just
Mm.
point blank. I'll be firm with that. Like, that's just, you don't need that shit.
Yeah.
There is nothing shameful about this. We are biological creatures. Our bodies are amazing. And to even be able to take these preventative measures that we have in modern day is incredible.
Yeah. And if privacy is a concern, like I've talked to people in open relationships who live in small towns and,
Hmm.
they just like they can't be out and they don't want to
Yeah,
go into the family practice because, that the their doctor is the parent at the PTA meeting that they see or whatever, like
yeah,
there are resources available online that you can get
yeah,
private STI screening tests delivered to your home. There are, company, and I'm not getting kickbacks. I just
yeah,
clear, I'm not getting kickbacks from any of these organizations or companies, but like Hello Wisp is a big one that I know of, and I know that there are others. If you need to be treated for, gonorrhea, chlamydia, syphilis, herpes, whatever, like they will send medications to your house. So it is conceivable that one can do all of their STI screening and obtain their medications without their insurance company
yeah,
ever knowing, or without their family practice doctor, who is the parent of their kid's friend, ever knowing.
yeah.
So there are things out there, and available to you.
Oh, and to note too, like when you are, I can't speak specifically to the mail order, but when you are going into the clinic, if you ask for a full panel, generally that does not include HSV1 or HSV2, which is the herpes simplex virus. So they generally won't test for that unless you are actively experiencing symptoms orally or genitally. Just know that you can ask for it and request it by name, but there are a lot of clinics that just won't test you at all, even if you ask for it without symptoms being present.
I can explain the reason for that. So,
Please do.
yes, it is a very common question, especially when we're talking about sexual health. So, the reason that we don't test for HSV is the overwhelming majority of the adult population has antibodies to HSV.
Mhm,
HSV is orally transmitted. So, like, some people get it in childhood, right? Because, like, a parent kissed them or whatever.
mhm.
And now
Or
they
through
just
the
have,
birthing canal.
yeah, or, well,
I've heard.
neonatal herpes is a whole other different thing, and it
Oh,
can
okay.
cause like severe like seizures. I've taken care of kids in the NICU
Oh,
that were exposed to
geez.
herpes genitally, or coming through the vaginal canal. That's a much more serious thing. But say you
Gotcha.
have a 4-year old at in school or whatever, they take a drink of somebody else's thing, and like all of a sudden they've got a cold sore, and now they have herpes for life, right?
Yeah.
I've taken care of kids who get herpetic whitlow, which is like a herpes lesion on the finger. If you test these people, they will test positive for herpes antibodies, even if they've never had a genital outbreak, even if they are like don't have regular ongoing outbreaks, even if they are not transmissible at all. So if you take a patient, test them for antibodies, tell them that they're positive for HSV, a lot of people have this sort of like emotional reaction that's like, oh my God, I'm like damaged goods. My life is over. I'll
Yeah.
never have sex again. Like nobody will ever want me again. When the
Yeah.
reality of it is like if a patient has an active genital lesion or a history of active genital lesions, the gold standard for diagnosis is a culture of the lesion,
Mhm.
right? And once someone is aware that they have that history, there is an obligation to disclose. So
Mhm.
if you have that condition, withholding that information from your partner and unintentionally giving them genital herpes, that has resulted in lawsuits,
Mhm.
big lawsuits, and a lot of like dragging people on the internet and professional embarrassment and family embarrassment and all this stuff, right? So
Mhm.
the reason that we don't test for HSV is because a positive, whether it's HSV1 or HSV2, doesn't necessarily mean that someone is at risk of active transmission.
Mhm.
Does that make sense?
Mhm. Yeah.
And you can get HSV1 in the genital area because there's historically been this understanding that like
Yeah.
HSV1 was oral and
Oral and then 2.
HSV2 is genital. You can
Mhm.
get HSV1 in the genital region, you can get HSV2 in the oral region, and some people have both. Some people will test positive like for antibodies and have no further outbreaks and not be transmissible at all. So
Yeah.
that's why it's not included on a routine panel.
Well, and correct me if I'm wrong, chickenpox is a strain of herpes virus, correct?
Yes, absolutely, and shingles
So
is,
yeah,
yeah, shingles
exactly.
too. So if you have a like a parent, I got a question about this week actually, that we were concerned about a shingles outbreak, and I was like, "Don't breastfeed
Mhm.
on that side because the baby who's not vaccinated yet could catch
Mhm.
chickenpox from exposure to a shingles outbreak," and they're all forms of herpes viruses.
Interesting. Yeah, so this is the power of having these conversations, right? Dispelling just the myths and misconceptions which foster shame. The more we can just talk about it openly and honestly, removing judgment and just inform ourselves, the more comfortable we can be with things that we've been taught to be uncomfortable with. Like I'm still learning. That's why I love talking to folks like you, Amber. Is this just ability to continue extrapolating on things that I'm interested in and that impact me. So I'm so delighted so many of you joined us today. We've got a couple minutes left. So I just want to make sure. I know we kind of went on a number of different tangents. I mean, Amber and I could talk all day and
All
still
day.
not have gone through it all. So please do drop in if you have any last minute questions or anything. And if you are watching the replay, please do leave a comment. If you do have any questions, I know I will be reading all of them personally and will do my best to answer everything that is addressed to me. But we're here for you. We're resources here for you. If you haven't seen the film yet, drop a little what number? Drop a 1 in the chat if you're planning to go see the film. And if you've already seen the film, drop a 2. But I'd love to know just kind of who's the film is Baby Girl. Sorry for those of you just joining. The film is the recently released Baby Girl with Nicole Kidman. I do love that everyone's talking about Nicole Kidman and Antonio Banderas is also in the film because I'm so used to seeing films that are starring so and so male actor and the female, like the women, are just like disregarded. Awesome. I see a lot of ones. We've got some. Do we get a kickback, A24? Can we get some like percentage of ticket sales? Like we're really driving people. No, but
Yeah.
do go see it. And then come back and then just start chatting in the comments. I want to know what you guys think about the film. I want to know if it brought up any questions for you, if it's having you reflect on anything about yourself or your partnership or partnerships. Are there things you're now curious to try? Are there things about your own fantasies and your own interests and your own desires that you're now maybe looking at in a different way? Are you looking at relating and relationships in a new way? Please do engage. We want to hear from you. Dr. Amber, do you have any last thoughts to share?
No, I'm so glad that so many people decided to join us today for this
Yes.
juicy conversation. There's just
Yes.
so much richness from a
Oh
cultural
yes.
standpoint and a social standpoint and a sexual health and aging standpoint. So Anybody
Yeah.
who's interested, my Substack is Under the White Coat. I write about medical stuff. I write about sexual health stuff. I'm very interactive with people who comment on my notes and posts. And I hope you guys have a wonderful weekend.
Yeah, and if you wanna follow either one of us, I recommend Under the White Coat on my Substack, which is Passport to Pleasure, Passport the number 2 pleasure. I talk about all things sex, love, and all modern relationships, so that's inclusive of all relationship styles from monogamous to non-monogamous. I'm working on my, ICF certified relationship coach certification, that was redundant. But I'm a certified communication, consent and communication expert through the Consent Academy. I am a NCSF, a registered kink aware professional. I'm a writer, I'm a host. I'm up to all kinds of juicy things. And most importantly, I'm here to answer your questions about how to relate in this modern day. So please do give each of us a little sub there, a little subscription on the Substack here. We've got Under the White Coat with Dr. Amber Hall, and then Passport to Pleasure with me, Ali Iseman. Thank you so much for joining us. This is office hours. It's going to be a free monthly, or this is a free monthly offering. It's going to become a paid subscriber option moving forward, but this first one is for everyone, so you can get a little taste of what this is about. Sometimes I'll have guests. Sometimes it'll just be me and you answering your questions. So thank you again so much. Thank you, Dr. Amber. I'm delighted by this, and I look forward to reading all of your comments and learning how to end a Substack live because I've never done this before. Oh, there's an end, but it says end. That makes it so easy. Thank you all.
Bye. Thanks, guys.